Hello lovelies, today we're going to take a quick shufti at Mausritter, Sword and Whiskers roleplaying by Isaac Williams. It won an Ennie in 2021. People have been talking about this at me for a while, particularly since we took a look at Mouse Guard, and I finally gave in. I'm not sure how I feel about it. It is not Mouse Guard, so it's not Burning Wheel, and that's a good thing. But I'm not sure how much of my attitude towards Mausritter is based upon it not being Mouse Guard and me being happy about that. Anyway, it is quite expensive for what you get. It comes in a box, which means it got hit with VAT, but sorry, that's something else. It doesn't come with any dice. You know, if you're gonna make a box set, to me, I think you have to make the effort and give you everything that you need. You get your main book, which has a cutout cover. I mean, cutout covers are cute, but I don't particularly like them. There is a very cheap branded pen, which I think is dry erase, which seems to be a bit of a trend lately. We have a turn tracker for keeping track of turns, obviously, but you know, how long it is till torches and stuff gutter out and who the players are and all that business. We have a pad of character sheets. I never use these because it seems like a shame to use them, so they end up not being used, which is kind of unfortunate. But that means to me these seem like a bit of a waste of time, because all you really need is some note paper. However, because of the layout of character sheets in Mausritter, it is kind of easier to use those, because the game comes with all these little tokens and things that you can keep track of on your character board. So your conditions, whether you're exhausted, hungry, frightened, whatever, and the stuff that you might have on you, you know, weapons and things like that. Yeah, there's quite a few of these. These are, of course, going to get lost fairly quickly, I am sure. So you can see equipment there, like armor, which takes up 2 spaces if it's heavy. Some weapons take up 2 spaces, and so on. I've often thought it might be fun to keep track of your character's inventory in a similar sort of way, by using tokens or something on a board, so that you would have to rearrange your backpack and so on to be able to get at things. But I always decided that it's too much of a kooky novelty thing, and things would get lost and production costs would go up. So I always decided against it. They've taken a different path. That's fair enough. Someone had to try it eventually. You do have a rules reference sheet, which is fairly useful, but it doesn't have everything on it, which is a little bit unfortunate. It comes with a GM screen of sorts, very thin card, and it retains its bend quite a lot, so it is hard to actually make it stay in position as a GM screen, at least to start with. So I'd suggest backbending it carefully before using it, and that gives you more reference. There's not a lot to the rules, so it doesn't need to be rules reference a huge amount, so it's mostly reminders and some of the more common tables you might need while you're playing. And it's another short one, which means it's not actually that useful as a GM screen. Printed in a similar fashion, we have a little adventure, though it's not really an adventure, it's more of a position, an encounter place, a dot on the map. So it's not particularly detailed, and that's either a criticism or a good thing, depending how you look at it. I mean, compare this little book to something like Mouse Guard and so on, which is much thicker. Obviously, some of that is to do with production value, art, and so on. But this isn't even 50 pages. And while it's a quite cramped layout with lots of stuff in it, that is reflective of the game itself. It's very simple. You have stats that are determined by 3d6, and then to test those stats you roll under them on a d20. That may be slightly modified, slightly. The familiar advantage, disadvantage mechanics are there, where you roll twice and take either the highest or the lowest. So that handles most things. And then in combat, you always hit, and you're just rolling to determine how much damage you do, and your armor then takes away from the damage. I don't find that particularly satisfying. It's nice to be able to use skills and things in combat, or to have different styles, or to rely on your agility or something to not be hit, and none of those possibilities really exist here. So I would be forced to house rule this quite a bit if I played it. But simplicity is clearly what they're going for here, really. So yeah, there's you also have backgrounds, and this is what you did before you became an adventurer, which doesn't really tell you that much apart from some starting equipment, but you could probably turn it into something mechanically that would work and help. It is a level system, but not really a class system per se. So your little mouse can get better, but in very, very broad, general sorts of terms. There aren't really spell casting classes exactly. You could choose to specialize your mouse in that as you go forward, but it's all based on runes, which are found carved into things. And so to cast a spell, you use your rune, and then that rune may be recharged over time. It's a lot like an old school D&D clone in a lot of ways, including the use of hirelings, and you can even build up to the level of having a warband. And you'll need a warband to take on particularly large enemies like, say, cats and so on. This is essentially like scale. And if you don't have an organised warband with which to take on things like large, cats, things like that, then you're kind of shit out of luck, really. There are other critters in this little world. It's unclear whether humans are still around or whether they've been wiped out by something or not. But there are other small critters who have their own civilizations, rats, frogs, things like that. So you can include those easily enough. It's a little bit odd in that the setting, such as it is, certainly implies sort of pseudo-historical European feudalism, and yet the kind of animals and things that you run into are pretty distinctly American for the most part. So a little bit peculiar. There isn't really a lot on the setting. There's rules for randomly determining locations and aspects of adventures, but it's going to take a fair bit of work to work that up into an actual adventure. There is an example location, settlement, that you can base your adventures from, and there are lots of random tables and so on. So what it has going for it, I guess, is the simplicity. And of course it's eminently hackable. I would want to add different races, frogs, bats, rats, shrews, voles, things like that. I would want to add all of those other species and things as options to it, and I would want to make your background or some sort of skill system applicable and appropriate. But it is so much simpler and therefore so much better as a game, particularly as an introductory game for people, than Mouse Guard. Mouse Guard is an overblown mess, despite being a kind of simpler version of Burning Wheel. This is broadly going to be familiar to anyone who's played any version of D&D, despite being different and a lot more simple. But for me, it's just not satisfying at the level that it's at. It's also a lot... it's also not a lot for the money that you're paying. And feels like a bit of a jip, to be honest. And the artwork obviously isn't up to the standard of Mouse Guard, but you wouldn't really expect it to be. It does have its own sort of charm and detail to it, but it is better in a lot of ways. There is one other rodent game which I should probably get around to reviewing, but I only have it on PDF, and that's Rats by Uri Kulianichuk, which is different to both Mouse Guard and Mausritter, in that it's not really even remotely cozy, cutesy at all. So yeah, maybe I'll get around to that. Probably not tomorrow, I've got a hospital appointment, but maybe next week. Style then. I mean, there is a consistent, nice style to Mausritter, and the artwork on the GM screen and everything. It is consistent, it is cute, it is thought through, it carries through almost the whole thing. The tokens could have done with a little bit more work, I think. It kind of takes me back to 1980s, board games, war games, things like that. Not too sure about that. The idea of using the tokens and so on is a good one. I've already said why I didn't really go for that in any of my own games. But because it does, the character sheet pad is more useful. Whether you can get replacements, I do not know. I don't know whether you'd play Mausritter enough to ever need them, to be honest. Alright, scores then. Style. A low 4. So 4 is a good score, but a low 4 because it just, for the money, more colour probably would have been good. I could have done without the novelty hollow cover, not hollow, HOLO, HOLLOW. Could have done without that, but it's cute, it's okay. The actual quality is pretty good. But it just, I think it needs a bit more polish, a little bit more ambition, especially for the money that this cost. In terms of substance, there's really not a lot here. That's by design, so it's a little bit unfair to criticize it overly much when it comes to content. There's certainly enough here, and I enjoy hacking systems and adding things and fiddling about with them. Whether you want to do that or not, that's that's down to you, I guess. Yeah, I enjoy that aspect, but in judging it, I've got to say that there's not a tremendous amount here, really. And so I have to score it on that basis. So I think that's either a high 2 or a low 3 for substance. Since there's enough here and it's kind of a toss-up, we'll say a low 3 for substance. So that's 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5. It's fine. It's very simple. It's probably a really good introductory RPG. but there's this weird fusion of cozy and old school that doesn't quite sit comfortably, and there's not really enough here. I don't think it needs more. It just needs that little bit more to elevate it to something that I could really truly recommend. Zang. Of course you can call me Daddy, and if you want to follow me on Facebook, you can find me at james.desborough, Post-Muslim Studios, all one word, JD Writer, and JGD Games.
It's time for you boys to share my last taste of the true black meat, flesh of the giant aquatic Brazilian centipede.